Hi, we are Jamie Bleakley,
Crystal Vermeer,
and we are occupational therapists and the owners of A Better Tomorrow Therapy and Wellness in Anchorage, Alaska. Please subscribe, like, share, click,
comment, give feedback, all the things.
Yep. Get kind of the word out for us. We appreciate it. Topic right now is we're going to talk about what occupational therapy, physical therapy, speech therapy are, and the difference between what we do in an outpatient clinic and other services that are available elsewhere. So
we'll try to keep it organized, but we'll probably meander. Follow along.
So
we'll try.
We'll start out with kind of the maybe less complex of, let's do physical therapy first.
Yeah, that seems to be the
Yeah.
easier to know.
So our physical therapists, they look at your large muscle groups. They work on transitional movements.
Mm-hmm.
They work on body alignment. They work on strength, coordination, endurance,
quality of movement.
Yep, quality of movement. So in our clinic, what you'll see with our physical therapist is a lot of obstacle courses, climbing in, out, under, over, transitional movements, sometimes going back with our older kids and teaching them to crawl. It's kind of interesting to watch some of those kids that don't have integrated primal reflexes, and they try to move and they skip that crawling stage.
Their body just doesn't cooperate the way that it's supposed to.
So we'll see that
there's
too.
also like a lot of the manual and hands-on, a lot of facilitating some of those quality of movements and transitions, especially in the younger kiddos, but even sometimes in the older kids too, just helping some physical hand-on support to help guide movement patterns to be.
And even as an adult going through physical therapy, like there's times that they're like, okay, do X, Y, and Z. I'm like, I don't even know that I have those muscles.
Yeah.
I don't know how to do that. So we tend to, as humans, make things easy, and go through the path of least resistance and use a lot of compensation, which the longer we do that, the more wonky we make our body, and then our body, and our body gets a little grumpy about it sometimes.
Yeah, one time we put one of our bosses, our old bosses, on a horse, on horseback for hippotherapy, and we're like, sit up straight, and she's like, I am, but she's like this, and we're like, no, you're not. And so we took some pictures and some video to show her. We did some supportive corrections and stuff, but she's like, yeah, I'm not straight at all. So like we what feels like lined up and straight for us isn't always the most straightforward. Or I know like sometimes my back's a little out, my hips are a little out, and I'm like, oh, I'm standing, and I'm like, my pelvis is turned, but my upper body is turned another way, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's not lined up. I need some adjustments and need some strengthening and stretching and some things to put that back where it belongs.
So knowing that too with our kids, sometimes there's more zig than there's zag, and so they need some help to get into that alignment, need some help to learn the correct patterns. So, we have some kids that like they're crawling or they're scooting, but they're like doing it on their butt with one leg, or
they always use one leg to lead going up and down the steps, and there's not that reciprocal back and forth pattern. Or they're super fast, but they can't slow down and have coordinated like walking patterns, the gait patterns where we walk. But they can run really fast, and they are super zoomy, but it's wonky and things are flailing in ways that they don't necessarily have to. And like to an extent that's okay, but also it's more energy expenditure. It's going to lead to those compensatory patterns, which leads to extra aches and pains and problems when you're 40 plus, when eventually those down the road things often don't get thought about in the pediatric realm, because it's like, well, they're kids, it's fine, they'll adapt. And it's like, well, they will, but also they're going to keep adapting and shifting into this malalignment, more dysfunctional movement patterns, which doesn't do great things when you're older.
Yeah. So we love our PTs to help keep us healthy and to help teach us the correct way to move, to engage our core, safety. Yeah. Next, let's go speech therapist.
Sure. We'll go more obvious to less obvious, more culturally known.
Yeah.
So our speech therapists, I mean, on a very basic sense, are going to help the kids learn to talk. So it's all about communication and using their voice, finding their voice, articulating the right sounds. So figuring out how to position their mouth to make things work. They will help with the grammar and how it all goes together, that form and use and function, like all of it comes together. I've taken a couple different speech classes and I'm just like, I'm in awe of all the things that they know and do because it's very intricate and very detailed. And I'm also like, thank you that I am not a speech therapist because that is not my personality. But I am very grateful for all of our speech therapists because they know all those little tips and tricks and finer nuances of how to make kids talk. But at the heart of that too is starting with, again, the relationship that we've talked about before. It's building that connection and the rapport and engagement and it, like being able to be attuned together so that they're comfortable talking. Because I think a lot of times there's some felt safety that needs to start first before we can just model and add in all of this new language and communication.
And I would say language starts well before a child's able to speak. So we're looking even back at a newborn and making eye contact and being able to pick up on nonverbal cues, like going most primitive, like our babies look at our face to know when things are safe and when things are not safe.
Yeah.
So being able to pick up on body language and nonverbal rules and nuances and all of that. So even in that first year of life, there's so much language-wise going on. And I've had parents that are, I'm like, you need to talk to your kid. And they're like, why? Which I think for some of us comes super natural.
Yeah.
But others are like, they're not talking back. Why am I talking to them? It's like,
or they feel silly. Like,
yeah.
It just feels weird. But I mean, that was not my experience. Like my daughter, who's a talker, 22 years later, and all the years in between, like when she was an infant, I remember like having her in the carrier in the cart going through the grocery store and be like, should we get this or this? She wasn't eating any of that stuff. She couldn't answer me back, but like we communicated with her all the time and we included her even though she was still nonverbal. But that just was like part of the flow and that felt very natural and that's not everybody's natural and that's okay. But also the more you communicate, the more you have opportunities and you are trying to open and close those circles of communication and get things going, the more opportunities that the child has to be able to pick that up and to figure that out as naturally as possible.
And I'd say speech and language, there's a lot of nuances too. There's receptive language. Our kids, like, what do they understand? And I think a lot of our kids that struggle with the expressive side of things, we underestimate them and we don't give them the credit that they're due, that they understand a lot more, and just because they're not able to express it back, people think that they don't. So looking at that, like, what does a kid understand? And that would be their receptive language. Are they understanding the words that are coming into them? Are they putting it in the right files in their brain to be able to recall it later? And then the flip side, the expressive language, sometimes we overestimate what those kids can do because they can spit out all of this language, and we'll see our kids that like will give you 20 answers to one question because eventually we'll get the right answer. Right. So if I keep throwing something out there and keep answering, or I can use that language to control the conversation.
Yeah.
So I don't have to understand what you're saying to me because I'm the one in control, and we're only going to talk about the topics that I know about.
Yeah. And those are very different. That receptive in and the expressive out don't always develop along the same continuum. And so it's really important to not judge overall communication development based off of one side or the other, but really looking at that whole picture, which is, why it's really important to have a speech therapist involved if there's concerns in that area, because they're going to do lots of testing and analyzing and figuring out, and then they have the tools and tips and tricks to support that.
What we found a lot with diagnostics of children with fetal alcohol syndrome is that they will test average for both of those things. They'll test in the normal range, but there'll be like a 20-point split between them. And so they might be really good in one area, but just squeaking by in the other, but they're both normal. So if you look at just test results and just go by numbers, you're missing out and not serving that child in all the areas that they need assistance with.
Yeah.
So.
And then another area that speech therapists can but don't always work with is like oral motor feeding type stuff. And that translates into the occupational therapist side too, is that some OTs or some speech therapists do or don't do feeding skills. So it really depends on the therapist's skills, knowledge, and comfort level. We have some speech therapists in our clinic right now that are like open to learning and are growing more in that feeding realm. And we have some that are just like, not for me. And we respect that, because feeding is such a delicate area that if you're not pretty confident and you're like comfortable in that, it could potentially be more harmful for you to be unsure and hesitant and doing it just because, gagging or doing all these other things, than if you really enjoy it and want to just learn those skills. Like, it's okay to be new and like hesitant, but being hesitant because it's really not your thing, it's not your thing, and it's okay. And we respect that at our clinic because it needs to be honored.
Other areas that our speech therapists touch upon is executive functioning and pragmatics. So being able to interpret their environment, being able to understand all of the crazy language that we throw into English that has nothing to do with anything. So our idioms and our sarcasm.
Some of our kids are very literal, and so those things just are like over their head, and they don't understand what over their head means. It's like, it's not up there. Like, what are you talking about? And my son was a great example of this. We worked really hard on idioms over the years, and he's now pretty sarcastic, and it sometimes it takes him a second, and sometimes he's like, that's funny. So like, it's still there, but he was very literal, and so he would say things and he would just be like, no, it's not that, and we're like, okay, sorry buddy, like, let's break it down.
So I think like speech, most people know what physical therapy is. Most people can say, I've had an injury myself and I had to go through physical therapy, or I had a grandparent or a parent that like had something and they had to go through that. So I think physical therapy is probably the most understood.
Yep.
Speech, I think, is a little more challenging.
But still, I think a little bit easier than the occupational therapy side.
People understand
speech.
They understand the talking part of it, but I don't think
there's a lot of details.
They are given the credit for all of the other things that go into speech therapy, and yay for them, because they have a ton of tests and a ton of paperwork that goes along with their sessions.
And like taking a language sample is a whole ordeal. Like there's to like just think about like, here's a 3-minute clip of stuff, and then like literally every gesture and pre-verbal, non-verbal communication, every sound, every utterance, everything. I have lots of respect to the speech therapy.
And even though they're making the sound correctly, are their lips and tongue doing what they're supposed to be doing to make that sound correctly? Because like that.
Because then is it going to blend into other sounds and like how they all work together? And they have all sorts of fun words, like diphthongs and other things that are legit words in their thing, and I can't remember what that means, but I do remember it's a word.
Yeah. So lots to go into that speech therapy that I don't think they necessarily get credit for. And then occupational therapy. What is an occupational therapist?
I always start with occupations as defined to me, like when I went to school, was an occupation is anything that you do in your life that has meaning. So as an occupational therapist, I can help you with literally anything that you do in your day, from getting up in the morning all the way through the sleep that you get back to getting up in the morning. So like that's a pretty broad spectrum, and then like you kind of specialize from there. In general terms, it kind of gets thrown out that like OT does the upper body and the arms and the extremities, and like PT is more like that whole body, like lower extremities, all of those big muscle movers of your legs. And there's some overlap in all of that. In the pediatric world, it's all about play and social skills and learning and life skills, which I love because I literally get to play for a living. I also get screamed at by 3-year-olds and bit and hit and kicked and spit on. So like there's a range of things that happen. But that's also, I think that's my favorite part, because I can help kids learn to write. I can help kids learn to crawl and move and transition. I do a lot of stuff with feeding. I do a lot of overlap in that pragmatic executive functioning, like how do they put things together? The idea of praxis, like can you come up with an idea? Can you figure out like how do I initiate that idea? How do I motor plan and like put all the pieces together and then execute it and then problem solve like what worked, what didn't work, and adjust it the whole way through? That's the idea of praxis, is this whole big cyclical like learning new motor plans and new ideas. And you get kids that are super super great at coming up with ideas, but their body doesn't necessarily function the way that they want it to, so their motor planning isn't great. So then they are very bossy and directive, and they give people lots of direction on what to do, but they don't do a whole lot themselves. They're like, I'm gonna not do that. And then the other side is like, maybe they're really not good at coming up with ideas, but they're great at like following everybody else's plan. So they're the followers that like tag along and watch what everybody else is doing. And ideally, we want people to have a good balance of both. Like, nobody needs to be super strong everywhere all the time, but you should be able to come up with some ideas. You should be able to problem solve and try new things. I do a lot of
or be able to have kind of that idea of like, ooh, that's a bad idea, and say no to the people that are bossing you around. So a lot of our kids get in trouble with that is because they're really good at following directions, and the people giving them directions are not always
making the best choices,
making good choices, or they realize that these kids can be tricked into doing things that
there's that like autonomy and self-advocacy, and I am an agent of change in my own life, and I can say yes and I can say no, and I can try and I can problem solve, I can ask for help is a huge part of it. We do lots with social skills, feeding, cooking, all those ADL things, like your daily life skills that you need to do to maintain your body and your living. I don't do driving, but some people do. I think that would be scary. I do a lot of visual work with kiddos, helping them to like match same and different and figure out the pieces that are a little bit different, as well as like visual is really complex. There's so many different pieces, and I mean, people think visual and they're like, oh, it's what you see. It's that like acuity that you go to the eye doctor for, but there's more to it. There's how do your eyes, converge in and diverge out. Like, can you adjust your eye skills and the motor skills in your eyes to track and to follow and to scan? Can you smoothly go across midline, or does it bounce and like jog around? Are you getting watery and fatigued? Like, I just did some of this last week with one of my friends because we did some visual work, but like, what is happening in the whole scheme of it all? And all of that's really important because it builds like your spatial awareness of the objects around you. Like, I need to know how far away she is, so when I'm gesturing with my hands, I don't smack her. Like, that would be
appreciate
rude.
That.
Yeah. But a lot of our kids that struggle with that, they would smack her. Like, and it wouldn't necessarily be a behavior of hitting, and that's again coming back to that, like, get curious about why. Sometimes it's just that it was a mismatch or a misfunction or a malfunction in the way that your output was trying to happen.
So a lot of times when I say I'm an occupational therapist, I get oh, you help people get jobs, you do. No. And then like when you throw out, I'm a pediatric occupational therapist, that just blows people's minds altogether.
Kids don't have jobs. Kids don't work.
And like the joking side of it is like, I don't have to wear shoes and I blow bubbles and play in a ball pit for a living, which is an awesome job. It's a very fun, cool job. But I think it goes back to like occupation of living is what we go to. And a kid's job is to play. And as a society, we've taken a lot of that away. A lot of our parents don't know how to play, or don't know how to follow a kid's lead for play, which goes into that motor planning and stuff. A lot of times we want to be the ones directing, versus sitting back and being that secondary player.
The world is a busy place, and sometimes it's just way easier to just do it, or like, let me tell you what to do, or do this thing. But then that kind of robs that autonomy and that growth that the kids need to be able to thrive. And so it might be easier in the moment, but it's definitely not going to be easier later on when they're 15 and they don't know how to wash a dish because we never had them do that, or tidy up their room, or any of the skills that sometimes it's just, as parents, I'm guilty of it too. Like, just give me that. It's easier. Let me finish this. But
I'll say when my bigs were little, like one of their friends came over and like picked up a toy and was like looking all over and like, where's the on switch? Where did the batteries go? I'm like, oh no, you have to play with that yourself. And like a lot of toys that come out, like even our Fisher Price barns and stuff, like they push a button and it goes, Meh. Like, so they don't even have to do the little imitative play with the animals, and the imagination side of it is where, as a society, taking that away from kids.
Or it's on a screen.
It's on a screen.
Which is so limiting back into that visual, like all the coordination, the pieces. Like if you think about play, even when I was a kid, enough years ago, it was a lot of outside play and moving. And when you think about it from a visual perspective, it's a lot of like near distance, far distance, shifting between all of that and having to coordinate all of those different visual pieces. If you're looking at a screen, whether it's a television screen or a tablet or even a little phone, like that's narrowing down that field of vision. And so we're losing peripheral vision. We're losing some of that coordination of being able to adjust how we look at things. So it's always interesting.
So yeah, so a lot of times I'll describe too, like we have physical therapy on one end of our spectrum and speech on the other, and OT is kind of that umbrella. So we overlap some with the speech, which like Crystal was saying, we do some feeding. We do some of the executive functioning and the cognitive social side of it that also falls into the speech realm. We also do the functional part of getting from A to B. Like if our kids can't carry their tray in school, how are they getting from the lunch line to the table? So being able to do that motor planning. We do a lot of emotional regulation, or even knowing kind of what you're feeling in your body, knowing why your stomach hurts. Like there's multiple reasons of like my tummy hurts, I don't feel good. Why? Is it you're truly sick? Are you hungry? Do you need a drink of water? Are you anxious?
You got poop.
You gotta poop. So going into all of that, we do things with constipation and toilet training and that side of things. So because pooping is a daily function.
It's a daily function, and it's vital for your feeding too. Like if you think about it, like you can only put so much in, and if it's not coming out, like that's really uncomfortable.
And there's more and more research coming out about the brain gut health.
Oh yeah.
And what that means. Like if we're not taking care of our insides and our gut and the flora and all of that going on in there, our brain's not working correctly. Toileting and toilet training and the interoception that our body needs, which is understanding what those feelings are inside, because sometimes it's
confusing.
Yeah, it's confusing.
And I think if the other there's research and stuff to back it up too, but like if you are overwhelmed with your other sensory systems, if your regulation is off and you're not as focused on, you're not going to be as focused on all of the other cognitive things. You're not going to be as focused on what's happening inside your body. So you only get so much brain bandwidth to be able to focus your attention. And if you're distracted and overwhelmed and the cars are too loud outside and the lights are too bright and everything is like extra and
there's
stressful.
a seam in my socks touching me.
Yeah, like all of these things compound and compound and compound, and even though they're not necessarily at the forefront of somebody's brain and they can't maybe articulate all of the different things that are happening, all that stuff builds in layers, and then that sucks away all of the attention that could go into like, what is my body feeling right now? Or could go away, like pull away the attention from an interaction or learning in the classroom or, you know, following parents' directions at home. And so they might be trying really hard to pay attention to what you're saying, but maybe your tone of voice is off or something is different and their socks are touching them and all the different stuff is happening. So they're there, but they're not necessarily all there. And so you have to kind of factor all those pieces in too. Like there's
and I think you went into
complex
that.
Human beings.
Sensory integration is another thing that occupational therapists focus a lot on. And I kind of joke, like when parents come in and I'm like, why are you here? And they're like, my kids has sensory. We all should. Yes. We all have sensory. There's a problem if we don't.
Yep.
But going beyond the sight and smell and taste and hearing and touch, which touch is a whole lot more than just being able to feel things. We have our vestibular system. So our kids that have the zoomies all the time, or our kids that don't move at all
and
because
really
it's scary and is sensory and are sensitive to that movement part of it.
They might get upset in the bath when they have to lean back to get their hair washed or to get their diaper changed and changes of any kind of their clothes and stuff. Like if they're not feeling confident in how their body is upright against gravity, which is that vestibular system, things are going to go sideways sometimes and behaviors are going to be seen.
And our proprioceptive is how our body perceives our muscles and joints working and kind of that deep pressure that goes beyond like the light touch. And these are our kids that often are labeled as bullies because they body slam other kids. In their brains, it feels great, and why doesn't everybody love that? And their teeny
they
tiny,
barely feel it at all.
Yeah, their teeny tiny little friend who just got knocked to the ground is not happy with this situation. Going back to vestibular, we have done a education before of like our kids that fall out of chairs on a regular basis. They don't know where their head is in space. They don't know where things are, and
they might not have postural like core control to hold themselves up. And sometimes a body in motion is a lot easier to maintain than a body sitting still. So those zoomy kids might be moving because they don't have the postural control because they're seeking some vestibular input. Like there could be a variety of factors, but it's likely not that they just want to move in and of itself. Like that's part of it, but.
Or their brain has gone into, I have this math problem and I'm going to concentrate really hard and my brain is doing this cognitive task and poof, I forgot to hold on to my body. And so now I'm on the floor and I've disrupted the entire math class and my teacher's yelling at me and mad at me.
I some of the different therapy techniques, one of them is a listening program, and so you put headphones on and then they have to do some things with their body. And there's a little boy that I worked with that you put the headphones on and he just freezes, he stops, he starts drooling because his cognitive load then is so everything happens and he has no awareness of it. And as soon as you take those headphones off, he's back to being able to use his words to talk. He has better drool management, and he's like, why did I pee myself? Like this, it's a whole thing. And so we aren't doing that anymore for right now because it's a little bit too much for him. But that was a very, very good example of cognitive overload and how one sensory system can just completely take over. And in that case, it was the auditory, but a little bit of vestibular. There's some like bone conduction vibration that taps that vestibular system at the same time, and it was interesting.
Wanted to talk a little bit too about the different services that are available. So we are an outpatient clinic, so we typically see our kids once to 3-4 times a week, depending on the kid's needs.
In the clinic.
To us. So they come to us. For the under 3 population, we have PIC, which is an early intervention, and they tend to go into the homes and work with families.
And that is our program here in Alaska. So if you're outside of Alaska, it might be called something different, but you would have an early intervention program. It's a state-run program, and each state has a little bit different.
Federally funded?
I believe it's at least federally supported. But every state has some kind of an early intervention program, and they're called different things. Ours is, like you said, PIC for programs for infants and toddlers, or infants and children.
And I'd say with those, I have had wonderful experiences with my own children, but a lot of times what they do is they evaluate the kid and then figure out who to best serve. So you might get a physical therapist who comes in and kind of plays the role of OTPT speech, like they do everything. Or you'll have a speech therapist that does some movement and does some fine motor, and has some background in the sensory integration and regulation, but that's not necessarily their primary role. And I think one of the things I say with our clinic too is it's if from an outsider coming in, if you walk into our clinic, I want you to have to think about what discipline is working with who, because our speech therapist should be getting up and moving with the kids. Our PT should be aware of sensory integration and regulation, and should be having our kids talk, because just because they can move from point A to point B, if they can't do it while having a conversation, that in itself is a problem. If they can't turn their head to look at somebody while they're going from point A to point B, that's going to cause some issues walking down a hallway. So everybody should be aware of everybody else's goals and be able to kind of mesh those and meld them together.
And that goes into being play-based and relationship-based, as if we're all using that as the basis of our delivery system for the intervention. That's the heart of everything that we're doing. And then we layer on our specific discipline skills and the advancement through development in our areas. But we start with relationship and regulation, and play, and they should look very similar, and then the end result is like what's happening in our brain is different because we have different goals and different agendas, but they should look very similar.
Yeah. So I do think the PIC system is great for community resources, for tying you into other services. They at 2.5 or so, they get kids enrolled in the ASD school system. So,
or the local school.
Yeah, the local school systems. So they are able to kind of bridge that gap from being in the home to getting into a school system to get additional services as the kid ages out. But I think there are some limitations time-wise. You know, sometimes kids get once a week services, sometimes it's only once a month. So it depends on the kid's needs and frequency.
And the delivery model being a single point of contact is great for the way that they need to do things and put things together. And it's a great catch system to be able to help support and guide. But a lot of kiddos, that's not necessarily going to be enough. And it's nice to have each individual different discipline because we are working on different things, and we have different milestone goals and achievement, like developmental achievements that we're looking at. And sometimes for some kiddos, especially more complex, lots of things going on, just getting PIC services might be all that the family can manage right away, and that's fine. But if possible, trying to get into additional services to support whatever areas need support, because early intervention makes a difference. It makes it a lot easier before those patterns and those behaviors and all of the different things are ingrained. Then we have to like rewrite that and rework through that and work through the trauma of behavior and all the different things that come up from that. So it's always good when we can start early and work through things.
And then once they kind of age out of PIC, the school systems kind of take over from there. The limitations with the school system is that it needs to be educationally based. So they may be working on handwriting, but they're not necessarily working on the postural control or the sensory
the stability
concerns,
in the shoulder,
the stability, all of the things that are causing the difficulty with handwriting. Very rarely is it just, being able to move your hand, get a pencil across the paper and write. There is something neurological, cognitive going on. There's something in the body. There's stability issues. There's sensory issues. There's so much more that goes into the kids having a handwriting issue.
And the other challenge with the school district is because of the educational component and because of the way that everything is structured in that setting, you have to be 2 standard deviations below the normal range, which is pretty delayed, in order to qualify for services. So if you're just low average or even a little below average, you might really, as a child, you might really be struggling, but you're going to get no support, and that's not ideal. And so we have a wider range of criteria to be able to say yes to services, and to be able to support those more subtle developmental delays that are happening. And then also there's different criteria for how you can get access into those services. So as occupational therapy, we are a related service. So if somebody's having those regulation and behavior concerns, and that's really the main concern going on for them, until it's a big enough behavior that it becomes a behavior concern that they can qualify for all those fancy little titles and different supports, they're kind of just stuck and without services, because even though we maybe as OTs could help them, we can't necessarily do that because of the criteria in the system and how things are put together. So there's lots of great things that happen from the school district and the services that can come there. It's very supportive, and we know a lot of therapists that are in the school district that are amazing therapists. We've worked with them in different places in the past. We worked collaboratively as community members over the years, being here as long as that we have. So it's not against any of them. They're great. There's a lot of really awesome people and teachers and all of it, but the system isn't set up to be as supportive as it could be, and it's not the same as getting outpatient services.
I would say too, resources and time is a barrier for the school system also. So a lot of times it's written into their IEP that they get X amount of minutes per week or per month, or which sometimes
Sometimes that's happening in groups. Sometimes it's like push-in where they're just kind of in the classroom supporting whatever's happening, which is great and super supportive. But again, it's not going to push forward that development the same as one-on-one individual services, weekly, ongoing.
And I'd say depending on the child and their needs, and if something's hard, you're going to see more behaviors. The more the kid's struggling, and kids find a very efficient way, creative way to get out of things that are hard. So if you have a kid, flipping tables and stabbing their friends and running out of the classroom every time you ask them to get a math book out, nobody in that classroom is learning. Our kids that the behaviors are super disruptive, they have to evacuate the classroom to keep everyone safe. So it's disrupting everyone, where if we can work on the regulation, if we can work on what that frustration is, what is causing that child to become so upset. Is it a visual issue? Is it a cognitive issue? Is it they're just overwhelmed?
Are they not eating well?
Are they hungry? Are they thirsty?
What are the basic needs? Even back to those eat, sleep, eliminate kind of needs.
Yeah. So if we can work on those things, it's going to help the entire classroom function better, not just that single child. So a private clinic has a lot more options on what we can work on. We can work on more of the base core root.
And ideally, everybody's working together. That's the goal, is to be collaborative. So we try to communicate with different therapists in the school district. We try to know, encourage families to give us a copy of their IEPs so that we can see what's going on there. We encourage them to share our reports with other people, or sometimes we have those collaborative relationships directly where therapists are talking to therapists or teachers. I've gone and sat in on IEP meetings and supported things. I've sat in on behavioral conduct meetings to figure out what do we do and how do we support, even as an outside provider, just to give my here's what we're doing, here's what we're seeing, here's some ideas, here's some extra pieces. So hopefully finding the team. And the other part that I was thinking about too, when talking about the different disciplines and the supports, is it's really important for parents to be comfortable with the team members. And so I've always said, if I'm not your therapist, I'm not your therapist, and that's okay. I have no hard feelings if you need somebody different, or you need a different approach or a different time, and it's not my time that I have available. I don't take that personally. And
even if it's not our clinic, we like to be collaborative with the other clinics too. We may not be the best fit. We may not have openings at the time that works for your family. We are more than happy to let you know what other clinics that we would take our personal kids to. So and going into the family part of it too, that I would say that's another downfall with the school system, is in a private clinic we can have parents involved. Which I know a lot of our friends that are therapists in the school system, they're that's one of the things that is hard, is because usually they see the parents at the IEP meetings.
Sometimes it's over Zoom or some telehealth style meeting or a phone call.
And then they may or may not see that parent again, and there's not communication between what's being worked on to be able to carry that over at home, or being able to build that rapport and that relationship with the family. That is a perk of having a clinic setting, that we can get to know the families and know what's working and what's not working at home. What we as therapists might think is a huge deal, the parents we can deal with that, not a problem. However, this is, and as a therapist we may not have thought of that, or not thought it was a big deal. But if a kid's flipping the table every night at dinner time, or vomiting every night at dinner time, that's disruptive to the entire family, and something that might need to be addressed.
Yeah, and then that's with the whole separate episode, but that's part of our interview process with getting in new families, is trying to be as comprehensive as possible, to be tell me your story. What do you need help with? Where can I best support you so that this feels like we're making progress? And it may not be the biggest developmental area, and it may be that they want something and I have to back it up for them and give them the milestones and explain how, okay, this is the steps that we're gonna have to take to get there. So first we have to do these things, but I keep them in that process too. which is easier in our setting.
All right. Well, thank you for listening to us. Thank you for joining us. If you have any questions or would like further information, please leave some comments and some feedback for us. And we would love to address those. Click all the buttons, the likes, the subscribe, the share,
Comments.
and help us out. Thank you.
Thank you.